Welcome back to part 3 of my 4-part series on emotional intelligence. If you're just joining, I recommend watching them in order. In my first 2 videos on emotional intelligence, I talked about how to identify our emotions and also how to manage them through conscious presence. Today I want to talk about the third skill of emotional intelligence, which is the ability to read others. This means noticing subtle and sometimes not so subtle behaviors, picking up on the tiny cues that help us understand as best we can what someone else is feeling. At its heart, this is really masterful listening. So what does masterful listening really require? The first 2 skills we cover keep us inwardly focused on our emotions, our thoughts, our physical presence. And reading others, this skill asks us to do the opposite. We have to focus our attention outward on the other person. But here's the thing. We can't do that well if we're hijacked by our own feelings. And that's why self-awareness and self-management are so important. Once we're grounded, focusing outward can actually be simple, even if it's not always easy. So we start the same way, noticing our breath, feeling our body, being aware of our emotional state. Then we can shift our focus to the other person. Once we do that, what are we listening for? There's a whole world out there of information. Nonverbal cues help, whether you're in person or on video. But remember, we have to check our assumptions by asking good questions. So how do we really listen? Otto Scharmer, who leads the Presencing Institute at MIT, explains this beautifully. He says that sometimes we only listen enough to prepare our own responses. Nothing new gets through. He calls this level 1 listening, or really non-listening. But he talks about 3 deeper levels. In level 2, we open up our minds. So we listen for facts and data. We're curious. We consider what the other person is saying. And in level 2 listening, I'm not sure that we pick up on emotional cues, emotional state. We're just listening for data and facts. Level 3 listening that he describes, where we open up our hearts, is empathic listening. And so that's when we're listening for how does the other person feel? What is the other person's point of view? That's where we empathize. So that's where we're starting to pick up on the motives, the feelings, the belief systems the other person has. And he says this is where we open up our hearts. And he also describes another level of listening, and that's level 4 listening. And that's where we open up our will, and we listen for what wants to emerge. We listen for future possibilities. We listen for what might change. We might be willing to be changed by what happens. And this is really the opportunity in listening, is to be affected by what we hear. And this is where we open up our will. Otto's 4 levels of listening are really some of the most important work that I've seen in the last few years around listening. But I'd be remiss if I didn't also talk about something that has deeply impacted my coaching. And that's the work of Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen. And she's a physician who teaches physicians. And they have come up with what they call generous listening. And generous listening is when, to use her words, we let go of all of that we've been talking about, all of the filters around listening, the listening fors, all of the things that I'm trained as a coach to listen for. And in generous listening, you listen for one thing only: what's important to that person in the moment. And this is a very, very special kind of listening. And it's incredibly powerful in the kind of trust that it creates in the other person. But if we go back to what we're trying to do here in this third aspect of emotional intelligence, where we're trying to understand the feelings and the motives of another person, the most beautiful and simple way to do that is to simply show up and be present for whatever is for that person in the moment. And when we're able to do that, we will know. We will hear it, we will see it, we will experience it. And it's incredibly powerful when we do that in that simple way. Just being fully present to what is true for that person in the moment and letting go of everything else. And the connection deepens incredibly. In my next video, I'll talk about expanding your comfort zone and the final skill in emotional intelligence, relationship management. See you then.